Anakin Skywalker's turn to the dark side shocked everyone in the galaxy. But if you go back and watch carefully, he was telling everyone exactly what was coming. The fall of Anakin Skywalker gets treated like a tragedy that came from nowhere, a good man broken by impossible circumstances. It makes for a beautiful myth. The problem is that it's not what actually happened. What actually happened is that across 3 films, 1 animated series, and roughly 2 decades of storytelling, Anakin Skywalker left a trail of warning signs so obvious, so loud, and so consistently ignored that the real question isn't how he fell. The real question is how many times someone could have stopped it and didn't. This is that count. Every discrete, identifiable moment where the alarm bells rang and nobody answered them. Warnings visible to the audience watching. Warnings visible to the characters living through it. Both categories matter, because this isn't just Anakin's failure. It's a systemic one. Start at the beginning. Literally the first time Anakin Skywalker stands in front of the Jedi Council. He is 9 years old. Qui-Gon Jinn has brought him across the galaxy on the strength of a midi-chlorian count and a conviction that this child is the chosen one. The Council evaluates him. Yoda, the oldest and most perceptive being in that room, delivers a verdict in roughly 60 seconds. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. That's not a general philosophical observation. That's a diagnosis. Yoda is describing a specific child standing directly in front of him. The Council's initial response is the correct one. They refuse to train Anakin, citing his emotional attachment to his mother and the measurable fear in his heart. They saw it. They named it. They acted on it. Then, Qui-Gon died on Naboo, and the Council reversed the decision under pressure. Obi-Wan Kenobi demanded they honor his master's dying wish. The Council allowed a newly knighted Jedi to take on the most volatile student in the galaxy, overriding the direct objections of their most senior masters. The diagnosis hadn't changed. The boy hadn't changed. The institution blinked. John Williams knew exactly what that meant. When Yoda accepts Anakin as Obi-Wan's apprentice in the Phantom Menace, the score shifts. A variation of the Imperial March plays underneath the scene. Not Vader's theme accidentally bleeding into the edit, deliberately placed. The production team was flagging the outcome for the audience in the most direct way a film can without dialogue. You are watching the origin of something terrible. The Jedi Council, unfortunately, doesn't get a soundtrack. Before Anakin even leaves Tatooine, there's one more thing. He says goodbye to his mother Shmi and promises her he'll come back and free her. A 9-year-old child, being taken away from the only family he has ever known, binds himself to a vow of return that runs directly against everything the Jedi Order is about to teach him. Attachment, possession, the refusal to let go. Nobody who witnessed that moment treated it as significant. It would take 10 years to understand exactly why it was. Fast forward a decade. Anakin is 19 years old in Attack of the Clones, and the behavioral pattern Yoda flagged hasn't softened. It's accelerating. He challenges Obi-Wan's authority in ways that are visible to everyone around them. He tells Padme the system underestimates what he's capable of. What the prequel films return to again and again, across all 3 installments, is Anakin's refusal to obey his masters, combined with a documented inability to govern his emotions. That's not hindsight reading, it's the text. His romantic attachment to Padme is a direct violation of the Jedi Code, and everyone with eyes can see it. Obi-Wan is aware of it. The Council has to be aware of it. The institutional response to an attachment violation by the galaxy's most powerful Force user is approximately nothing, which is its own kind of warning, except this one belongs to the Jedi. They would marry in secret on Naboo at the end of Attack of the Clones. A secret marriage. A Jedi Knight, the man the prophecy calls the Chosen One, enters into an ongoing covert relationship that requires him to lie to his master, his council, and every colleague he has. The psychological weight of maintaining that deception across years of active war is something the Jedi Order never considers, because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging they already knew and chose not to address it. On that same Naboo retreat, before the wedding, before the Clone Wars, while there's still just two people at a lakeside dinner, Anakin tells Padme that the Republic's democratic system doesn't work. That what's needed is someone wise enough to be a benevolent dictator who could just make people agree. Padme, a former queen and sitting senator, pushes back gently. Anakin doesn't retreat. He doubles down. That scene is in the second film, at a table with candles and a lake view, and the man who will help install a galactic empire is already articulating its philosophical foundation over a quiet meal. It gets treated as a romantic quirk, a young man showing off. Then the dreams start, recurring visions of his mother suffering. In Star Wars, Jedi precognition through dreams is established canon. These aren't metaphors. Anakin tells Obi-Wan about them. Obi-Wan's response is effectively, probably nothing. Stay on mission. The assignment is to protect Padme on Naboo. Tatooine isn't in the parameters. He goes to Tatooine anyway. His mother has been taken by Tusken raiders. He finds her in their camp, barely alive, and she dies in his arms. What Anakin does next is the single most important moment in the entire prequel trilogy. Not because of what it reveals about him, but because of what happens after. He hunts down the Tusken Raider encampment and slaughters the entire tribe. Men, women, children, and animals. Every living thing in that camp. By the time he starts, his mother has already died. He tracks them down and kills them systematically, completely, without stopping. A calculated, sustained act of violence that erases an entire community. Then he goes back to the Lars homestead and tells Padme exactly what he did. I killed them all. They're dead, every single one of them. And not just the men, but the women and the children too. They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them. He says this out loud, on screen, to another person. Padme hears the entire confession, comforts him, and there is no indication she reported it to the Jedi Council. No Jedi investigation follows. Obi-Wan Kenobi doesn't learn what happened until years after Order 66, when he's in exile on Tatooine, investigating a series of brutal attacks on settlements, and pieces together what Anakin did. At the time of the killings, the only person who knows is Padme. She says nothing. Yoda senses something. In a scene many viewers interpret as Yoda perceiving Anakin's anguish through the Force, a disturbance reaching him across the galaxy. His response is philosophical reflection. No investigation. No direct contact with Anakin. No council alert. Whatever the precise nature of what he senses, the most powerful Jedi alive registers that something is deeply wrong with his most dangerous student and responds with introspection. This is where the indictment shifts from Anakin to everyone around him. A 19-year-old Padawan commits mass murder, confesses it to his girlfriend, and the event leaves zero institutional trace. Padme chooses emotional loyalty over accountability. The Jedi choose distance over intervention. Anakin walks away from the worst thing he's ever done without consequence, which tells him something very specific about what he can get away with. The Clone Wars span roughly 3 years between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. Across those years, the escalation doesn't stay quiet. It compounds, in ways that multiple Jedi witness directly. In Season 2 of the Clone Wars, Anakin force chokes and tortures Poggle the Lesser, a prisoner of war, to extract information about parasitic brainworms threatening the crew of a medical vessel. The tactical justification is real. Lives are at stake. The action itself is a dark side technique deployed against a captured, restrained enemy. Force choking isn't a neutral Jedi skill. Anakin uses it on a prisoner in a scene that should have generated a formal council inquiry. There's no record that it did. The Mortis arc in Season 3 is the most explicit warning in the entire timeline, and it belongs to both categories simultaneously, characters and audience. In this arc, Anakin is drawn into direct contact with the Force itself, three entities embodying different aspects of the Force, and confronted with what he is becoming. The precise mechanics of that confrontation and what survives it are in the episodes themselves, but the core of it's this. The Force staged the most direct possible intervention with its most important student. It didn't take. Throughout the Clone Wars, the pattern of insubordination documented from the beginning of his training continues to compound. He operates by his own rules, pushes against institutional hierarchy, and the emotional volatility that should have triggered formal council review is consistently absorbed as a tactical inconvenience and nothing more. When Ahsoka Tano is falsely accused and put on trial by the Jedi Council, Anakin investigates relentlessly and ultimately proves her innocence, the right outcome. The emotional register underneath the investigation is pure possessive fury at the institution for threatening someone he cared about. When the real culprit who framed Ahsoka is revealed, the resolution is driven by Anakin's personal outrage rather than any sanctioned directive. She still leaves. Ahsoka walks away from the Jedi Order entirely after her exoneration, citing the Council's treatment as the reason. The Council lost one of their best students, in part because the environment around Anakin was structurally corrosive, and nobody with authority addressed it. The pattern has a name. Anakin Skywalker executes prisoners. The dark side techniques deployed against captured enemies across the Clone Wars, force-choking Poggle the Lesser for information, treating prisoner welfare as subordinate to mission priority, run forward directly to the opening minutes of Revenge of the Sith, when he beheads Count Dooku on Palpatine's instruction. Dooku is on his knees, unarmed. Palpatine says it's the right thing to do. Anakin pauses for a fraction of a second and kills him anyway. Then he says it was wrong. He knows it was wrong, and that's what makes the entire catalog of prior warnings land harder. Anakin has a moral compass. He just keeps overriding it, and the override gets faster each time. By Revenge of the Sith, every major element is already in motion. The fear of loss, the attachment, the willingness to cross ethical lines when the stakes feel personal, documented, known, unaddressed. The new ingredient is the dreams about Padme, recurring, prophetic nightmares of her dying in childbirth. Anakin has been here before. He dreamed about his mother suffering, and those dreams came true. He knows exactly what his visions mean. He goes to Yoda, and Yoda gives him technically accurate philosophical guidance. Death is a natural part of life. Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force. Mourn them, don't. Miss them, don't. Attachment leads to jealousy. The shadow of greed, that is. Every word of that is correct. None of it helps a man who watched his mother die in his arms and spent the years since carrying that wound in silence. Yoda diagnosed the problem in The Phantom Menace. He confirmed the diagnosis was still active in Revenge of the Sith. His treatment protocol across more than a decade was philosophy. Accurate philosophy, delivered without the emotional infrastructure to reach a person in genuine crisis. Anakin doesn't need to be told that attachment leads to suffering. He already believes it. What he needs is someone to help him survive the grief anyway. Nobody in the Jedi Order ever offered that. Palpatine did. At the Coruscant Opera, Palpatine tells Anakin the legend of Darth Plagueis the Wise, a Sith Lord so powerful he could use the Force to prevent death. He frames it as a story. He watches Anakin's face while he tells it. Anakin asks how to learn this power. Palpatine says it's not a lesson any Jedi would teach him. The companion video to this one covers Palpatine's full manipulation strategy in detail. But the point here is simpler. Every warning sign the Jedi ignored was a resource Palpatine used. Every refusal, every dismissal, every philosophically correct but emotionally useless council response got converted into leverage. The Council's final institutional failure is almost geometric in how much damage it does. When Palpatine names Anakin as his representative on the Jedi Council, the Council accepts the appointment as a political concession, but refuses to grant Anakin the rank of Jedi Master, an unprecedented move that puts him on the Council while simultaneously signaling he doesn't belong there. They deliver exactly the kind of public disrespect that Anakin has been accumulating resentment about for 13 years. Then, in the same conversation, they ask him to spy on Palpatine, the man they just publicly humiliated, the man Palpatine has been cultivating since he was 9 years old, the man who has never been successfully managed by any tool the Order possesses. They assign him as their intelligence asset inside the relationship that is actively destroying him. Mace Windu's attitude toward Anakin runs through this entire catalog as a constant thread. Windu has been skeptical since the first evaluation in The Phantom Menace, and his skepticism is correct, but he expresses it as institutional coldness rather than engaged guidance. Over 13 years, he never builds the trust that might have made Anakin choose differently at the critical moment. When everything converges in Palpatine's office, Anakin has to choose between a Jedi Master who has regarded him with suspicion since he was 9 years old, and a Chancellor who has spent that same time treating him like the son the Jedi never let him be. The scene in Palpatine's office is where every prior warning reaches its endpoint. Anakin arrives to find Windu holding Palpatine at lightsaber point. Whatever the truth of what he's looking at, what Anakin does next is his choice alone. He cuts off Windu's hand. Palpatine kills Windu. Anakin stares at what he's done and says, "What have I done?" Then, within the same scene, he kneels and swears loyalty to Palpatine. The speed of that transition is the most honest moment in the entire trilogy. No great deliberation. The threshold was shallow. Everything before that scene, the massacre, the torture, the rage, the years of Yoda's warnings and the Council's failures, all of it compresses into a few seconds, and Anakin chooses the man who promised he could save Padme. Obi-Wan Kenobi's role in this story is the one that cuts deepest, because Obi-Wan was supposed to be paying attention. He trained Anakin for more than a decade. He watched the arrogance develop, the attachments form, the authority challenges accumulate. He knew something was wrong in a way that went beyond what any report could capture. But he consistently chose the mission over the mentorship, the assignment over the relationship, the procedurally correct response over the harder conversation. Across 3 years of war, the lesson the Order drew from Anakin's emotional volatility was that it was a tactical inconvenience rather than an emergency. On Mustafar, after Anakin has massacred the Separatist leadership and Obi-Wan has fought him to the edge of a lava flow, Obi-Wan looks at what remains of his former apprentice and says, "I have failed you, Anakin." That's the confession the entire trilogy builds toward, his acknowledgement that he was the primary warning system, and the warning system failed. He saw the signs. He reported some of them. He never found a way to reach the person underneath the pattern. Count what was available to act on. Yoda's diagnosis at age 9, delivered in open council and overridden by grief and political momentum. A vow to Shmi that bound a child to attachment before his training even began. A decade of behavioral escalation, documented across 2 films and 1 animated series. A massacre, confessed out loud to the woman who loved him, with no indication it was ever reported to the Jedi Order. Yoda sensing the event through the Force and responding with philosophy. Torture of a prisoner of war with no formal consequence. A vision on Mortis of his own dark future. Repeated disobedience of direct orders across 3 years of war. Prophetic dreams that mirrored the last time he had prophetic dreams, and the last time those came true, it killed his mother and an entire tribe. A council that publicly humiliated him and then asked him to spy for them. A chancellor who had spent 13 years offering Anakin everything the Order refused, none of it hidden, all of it witnessed by at least one person with the authority and the capability to intervene. The galaxy was shocked when Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. Anyone watching from a cinema seat in 2005 with the full prequel timeline behind them had no excuse to be. Because John Williams put Vader's theme in the score the day Yoda accepted this child into the Order, and every scene after that was a chapter in a book whose ending had already been written. George Lucas didn't write a story about a man who secretly fell apart. He wrote a story about a system that failed loudly, repeatedly, and in plain sight. The individual warning signs are Anakin's. The catalog of ignored responses belongs to everyone else. Yoda knew. Obi-Wan knew. Padme knew. The Council's own decisions made the outcome more likely at each turn. Anakin Skywalker didn't conceal what was coming. He confessed a massacre to a person who loved him and received forgiveness without accountability. He declared his arrogance openly to the people assigned to correct it. He told Padme at a dinner table on Naboo that dictatorships had merit when the right person was in charge. Said it on screen, in the second film, and nobody in the galaxy blinked. The tragedy of this story isn't that nobody saw it coming. The tragedy is that everyone who saw it coming found a reason not to act. Grief, politics, philosophy, personal attachment, mission priority, institutional inertia. The warnings were there from the day Yoda looked at a 9-year-old and named the path to the dark side. They chose to train him anyway, and spent the next 13 years choosing not to treat what they'd already diagnosed. If you want to understand the other side of this story, the man who spent 20 years engineering that choice, the companion video on Palpatine's full manipulation strategy covers every door the Jedi left open, and how the most dangerous actor in the galaxy built an empire on a Jedi's unanswered nightmares. Subscribe so you don't miss it.